back, fellow meeples, to another episode of Unqualified Experts. I'm your host, Braden Gardner.
I'm your corrupt overlord, Shane Dayton.
And today we thought we'd try something a little different and talk about some of our favorite stories from playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Go story time.
Woo! All of these stories are going to take place within various Dungeons and Dragons systems. The majority of them will be 5th edition, but
I got a Pathfinder,
and I've got a 3rd edition D&D story as well. So, I guess without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. My first story is actually a 5th edition story. It was actually my first experience with 5th edition. It had come out a year or two previously, and our D&D group was a little anxious about shifting from 3.5 and Pathfinder to 5th edition. We'd heard a lot of mixed reviews on the internet about it. Some people really liked it, some people really hated it. But ultimately, 5th edition, for better or worse, was going to be around to stay pretty clearly. It didn't have any of the glaring flaws 4th edition had. So we elected to give it a go, and we kind of learned the rules as we were going along. And as I'm wont to do when I try out a new RPG system, whether it's D&D or Warhammer 40k or Eclipse Phase or any of the other ones that we've played over the last 5-6 years, I typically look to see what I can do with a spellcasting class first. And in the case of D&D, typically I will go for the wizard first. Now, usually wizard's my preferred class for pretty much anything I do anyway, but with 5th edition in particular, I've really taken the time to kind of play each class at least once to kind of learn the ins and outs and how they work. But wizard's kind of where I'm comfortable, so I started there for this campaign where we were learning the rules. So I already knew my learning curve was going to be a little bit higher than the average PC. So I go through and I see that, much like in 3rd edition, wizards can specialize in various schools of magic. And I went through, looked at them, evocations as good as ever, conjuration, abjuration, necromancy, they're all there. And I look at divination, and having come from 3rd edition as my first D&D experience, divination was bad. Like, real bad. There wasn't a lot of use for scrying or other similar abilities.
You were a glorified fortune teller.
Yeah, basically. And it was just not good, so I wasn't expecting a lot. And the more I started reading into divination, the more I realized that I was going to get the opportunity to do something surprisingly interesting with this character, so I elected to go with the divination route. One of the primary class features of a divination wizard is their ability to basically roll 2 or 3 d20s at the start of each day, and you just kind of set those aside, and when either you roll or the DM rolls a number you don't like, you substitute one of those d20s in its place. Naturally, this ended up being a long con because this wizard also, for story reasons, started off basically afraid of magic. So the party didn't fully catch on to the fact that I was actually playing a wizard and not an archery class like the ranger until I was level 6 or 7.
Which was a pretty good long con.
Was a good long con, and I got ratted out by a top tier NPC, which was unfortunate. But it is what it is. So by that point, I was getting to the point where I could get to the d20s and start subbing rolls in. And every 4 levels, if you play with the variant rule for feats, you can pick up a feat instead of an ability score increase. So I went through and looked through the feat list, and there are a lot of interesting feats you can take for a character like that, but obviously my eyes landed on the lucky feat, which lets you have 3 rerolls a day, which doesn't overrate what you get with the divination wizard. So I'm reaching the point now where I'm getting 5-6 rerolls a day, and basically anytime something happens I don't like, I'll just be like, hold on, I'd like to re-roll this, please. And it didn't really take long for my DM to start kind of getting a little bit of an eye twitch, where he would interact with me and he'd get a good result that he was looking forward to, kind of give me a little bit of my comeuppance, and I'd be like, hold on, and twitch. It was a great way to make sure that the wizard wasn't singled out as an easy target. I feel like after a while to kind of avoid the annoyance, I just wasn't the subject of direct attacks nearly as often, which was a good system for me because wizards are traditionally squishy unless you're playing the war wizard.
Or unless you can change 7 dice.
Well, yeah. And with only one major encounter a day, it was pretty easy to stay out of harm's way.
That just means you weren't trying harder. I like the one. Was PJ the DM for that?
PJ was absolutely the DM for that.
I'm sure you got some eye twitches.
I got a few.
And I'm sure you earned them.
And I wasn't even the most annoying character in that campaign, but that's a story for another day.
Alright, so my first one, my first campaign was actually 5e with Braden. My second was playing a Pathfinder with another friend of mine. And so, considering 5e was my first and only game I had played at that point, jumping to Pathfinder was, I think, shock is an understatement. And for those of you who play both systems, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I enjoy them both, but some differences. And so I'm coming to this group, I'm told, well, the group needs a tank, so you need to be like an orc barbarian. And the best way to get yourself in a lot of trouble you don't want to deal with is to tell me what I have to do. Because, I respond to authority so well.
I'm shocked.
Like, fine. If I have to be a half-orc barbarian, so I don't even get to choose my own class or race, fine, we'll do this. I will find a technicality. And I did. So I want to introduce you to Croc the Philosopher, because he believes in the mind, because brain is better than brawn, which is why he studies philosophy. Because he wants to think and learn. And the moment I announced that name, the group knew exactly what they were in for, and I think the DM started to suspect he made a horrible mistake. So since it was Pathfinder, I gave myself just enough intelligence to get that extra little stat boost each time, because we were building I believe it was level 8 or 9 character when I jumped in the campaign. So I had a charisma-based barbarian. Why charisma? Because intimidation is under charisma. And my dice rolling was notoriously bad at that point, before I got any good dice. Like, legendary to this day levels of bad. But my intimidation was a plus 21, so it didn't matter. And so the first time, the city guards have come to arrest you. I roll intimidation, roll a 3. Well, you're about to get arrested. Why would I have to get? You had to get a 20. Oh, that's cool, because I have. And then he looked at my sheet. Wait a minute. And you could see him doing the math in his head. You're a charisma-based barbarian? Yes, I am. My intimidation was plus 29 by the time we got to level 12. So I'd roll a 1 and have a 30. And so it's like, the guards come to arrest you. You're going to walk away now. Intimidation. He could not justify even trained city guards being able to deal with a 30, and he decided it wasn't worth their time. I scared away a young white dragon at one point. And he's like, And so this character was delightful. He was just enough of a tank to not get murdered, although we had a few close calls, because when you don't put any strength in a barbarian, it's bound to happen. But the amount of times I could intimidate my way out of trouble or into a better hotel room, it was just glorious. And it was one of those characters where he got away with doing stuff he shouldn't have. When we needed a rogue and we had somehow the barbarian and heavy armor had the best dex and stealth score. Don't ask me how. I rolled to sneak up and kill the party while everyone was quietly arguing over who would sneak up and kill the enemies. I got through all but one of them before someone woke up. And I'm like, wait a minute, how does the orc in full plate sneak? And you could tell the DM was just getting bad dice roll after bad dice roll. And it was that type of shenanigans the whole campaign. It was, so Croc the Philosopher, beloved by 2 of us, tolerated by 3, and hated by one the DM gave me my due for finding a way as a new Pathfinder player to stymie him, but he was not thrilled with it.
I imagine not. And part of being a good DM in that situation, you gotta give credit where it's due, and sometimes finding a creative way to deal with that problem isn't easy or necessarily even feasible. Like, the only thing I could think of would have been just to basically put you up against repeated things that were immune to fear.
Yeah, or that just, they were in some type of story society where charisma was a non-issue.
Right.
So they don't have emotion, so you can't intimidate them. But to his credit, he played it off really well. My character became a living legend in Pit Fighting Town because I used intimidation on the crowd because I wanted to build my reputation. And he was all for those types of shenanigans. And it was a fun campaign. It was very different, and I would definitely play Pathfinder again. But man, such good characters, such a different system. And I probably have dozens of stories about that campaign I could tell, but we will leave it with Croc the Philosopher, winner of a beauty pageant, because there's no way the judges of a beauty pageant were going to tell an angry half-orc with an intimidation of 38 on the roll that he wasn't winning. So that was worth 100 gold pieces.
That's legit. So, speaking of putting DMs in difficult spots, I was in a campaign many years ago at this point, and we were playing using D&D 3.5. It was a wonderfully built and executed homebrew campaign. It was one of those legendary ones that spans multiple years, and considering we were college students at the time, that's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, no kidding.
And we had a Saturday where not everyone could show up, so we had 2 of us there, the DM, and then the DM was bringing in another character. At least that was how it was presented to us at the time. But he'd given this particular character a surprising amount of license in how they were allowed to enter the story. And even to this day, I'm not sure whether they were actually seriously planning on entering the campaign as that character, or whether they were more excited about kind of setting up as a monster of the week sort of thing. And this was a bizarre campaign in its own right. We had a chameleon, which basically specialized in being able to do a lot of different things, but do them really, really well. And I was playing a spell thief, which was a variation of the rogue where you could give up sneak attack dice to actually take spell slots and store them and then use them on your enemies. Which was a really cool concept. I wish they would come back around and do something much more akin to that in the future rather than what we got in 5th edition. But I digress. So the chameleon and I basically are getting ready to move in on the territory of this character who happened to be a lich. Don't ask. And this lich, for whatever reason, had managed to secure themselves an adamantine lair in a cavern. Like, this cave was just made of adamantine, designed to be impregnable. And it was fairly well thought out. Like, all sides, you're not getting in from above or below. You're going to have to deal with this lich directly, which is one of the worst ways you can deal with a high-level caster in pretty much every situation is to deal with them directly. Particularly if, like this one, they specialize in evocation. So, the two of us just kind of sit there for a little bit, and we're talking about various possibilities of what we can do, and the player playing the Lich is sitting across the table, looking entirely smug and too pleased with himself. You know the type, the one who thinks he's outfoxed the clever people, the one who is going to take every opportunity to crow about it for a while, and rightfully so if it's cleverly done. And this was actually pretty cleverly done. But one of the things that I did, having had a few years of 3rd edition under my belt at that point, was I had accumulated a fair number of 3rd edition source books. Not nearly the quantity you might see behind me, but I had at least 10, 15 different books available to me at that point. So what I ended up doing, and this ended up being just an invaluable tool for me for campaigns for better part of 3 years, was I went through those books and I looked through for the inexpensive utility or very low magic items. 3rd edition, much like Pathfinder, rewarded getting different types of bonuses and stacking them accordingly, kind of doing a little bit of number crunching to get the best result. So if you were really willing to put in the homework, you could build really powerful characters that would go far beyond what a typical build would look like. And as a result of kind of going through these books, plus a few others that I borrowed from friends along the way, I basically ended up creating a toolkit that I gave to any character I built that started at 6th level or higher, because 6th level was the lowest level that afforded you the starting gold to buy this toolkit. And I basically kind of had, I don't know if you can see it here, but I basically had...
You need a prop for the toolkit you built.
Yeah, and I basically put in the description verbatim from the book for each item, and I had just this astounding array of tools available to any character that I built, because most people who I gamed with didn't start us below 6th level. So I would forego going for a particularly powerful MacGuffin, show up with a couple bags of holding with all of this, and we'd be off to the races. And part of that was a slew of mining equipment. And not the cheap stuff, the good stuff, the stuff that could mine through particularly tough ore, such as, adamantine. So I looked over at the chameleon and was like, how do you feel about not dealing with this Lich today? Or ever, until he decides to come to us on our terms. And my buddy Eric, who was playing the chameleon, was like, I'm listening. Like, well, I have these mining picks, and this wheelbarrow, and a few other tools to help us make a pretty penny mining this adamantine. How do you feel about us ending the session with way more money than we're supposed to have? At which point, the DM, who has realized what I am putting together and scheming, looks extremely concerned, as though this plan of his has backfired.
Because it has.
The player playing the Lich hasn't figured out what we're doing yet, so we basically set up shop and we literally just mine adamantine. And we just keep doing that, and we ignore the Lich because we like to think that we fight smarter, not harder. So we just keep doing this, and eventually a week in, the DM kind of looks over to the player playing Lich, is like, you gotta do something. Because we're literally just sitting here getting ready to break his economy in half, and the Lich is stubborn and not wanting to give in his high ground, so to speak.
I mean, a lich doesn't want to leave their lair if they don't have to.
Exactly. So we just played off that, and we eventually ended up having our encounter, and I think the lich adventured with us for a little bit. It wasn't terribly long, but it was a noteworthy part of the campaign in its own right. So we walked away with thousands of gold worth of adamantine, which suited us just fine, because...
Yeah, I'm sure you weren't heartbroken over that.
we were both playing characters that were extremely materialistic, so it was great for us. We got a bunch of new gear, and everybody was a winner. Except the DM.
Except the DM. Speaking of DMs realizing the moment has gone horribly, horribly wrong, Braden, you may remember this.
Oh, no. Well, you're
It's
only...
my first nat 20. So, one of my favorite memories goes for our first game. To say my very first game was 5e D&D, which Braden was kind of grouped together, which still games together to this day, which is awesome. I could not roll dice for the life of me. And that is an understatement. And before you, by all means, tell us in the YouTube comments your stories of friends who are worse dice rollers. They're not. I once had to take a natural 1 after rolling with advantage twice, so I'll let you do the math on that. Hint, it's 1 in 16,000, I think. 1,600, 16,000. It's a lot. But we've been playing for 5 or 6 months at this point. I was playing a ranger. My dice rolling was so bad, I had to roll a 10 during the 0 session to get a message to join the adventuring group. Got advantage to climb a tree, because, ranger.
Should be easy.
The hawk eventually had to come down off the branch, and I think he was about to maul me with a badger after the 4th failed roll. So we're talking at that level. We played 5 or 6 months, and I never had a natural 20. And we rolled quite a bit. Whether it was a check or a battle or whatever, I never got close. Like, to the point where everybody at the table noticed. So during this one time, we're in the city, Waterdeep, and we're trying to track down the satyr because stupid apocalypse, as happens in D&D worlds, particularly around Waterdeep for some reason. And so, trying to track this guy down, apparently we crossed the wrong people and some constables yelled stop. And well, once again, doesn't like authority, not inclined to listen to directions. And so after all this runaround, Braden the DM put us through for like 3 sessions. I wasn't having any of it. My ranger, with his amazing 9 strength, looks at the door that I know I'm not opening without a nat 20, because the description he put into it, thick oak, double band, iron red, just solid door, like, he made abundantly clear this is a door barbarian and have trouble moving. And so he's in the middle of saying, I said, okay, I'm going to ram into it, try to break it down. My character's a drunk. It's in character. He'll get hit, fall down, get arrested, whatever. And so I roll the dice, and he's saying, okay, but the only way, and you can tell he's about to say, the only way it opens is with a nat 20. And I interrupt him, because I got my first natural 20. And I remember the look on Braden's face, because it was just like a, okay. 4 or 5 seconds of stunned silence. Because none of us knew that was even possible. And then he's like,
Rude.
all right, we're doing this. He wanted to make it clear we're so unlikely. I got a nat 20 success and took 6 points of bludgeoning damage because my shoulder hurt so much breaking the door open.
But he did it.
And he did it. And it led to a comedy of errors. We thought this was where we could find someone to track down the satyr. So it didn't go well. I had to throw back stone shape. We tried going invisible. Somehow the constables of Waterdeep know that trick, so they had like the magical equivalent of the blue paint bags that go off during bank robberies. So you're not invisible if there's like a blue man running around.
Which somehow the ranger and the rogue got caught.
With dex saves, we failed the dex
But
saves.
not the wizard.
Yeah, that was a weird campaign. So there's 3 places we could search as they are getting dynamite and mages to come after us. We searched 2 of the 3, see no sign of him. all kinds of chaos. My character runs into PCs he did not want to run into again, much less be in the dead of. Trashes the place, writes in paint it's the satyr's fault, hoping to draw him out. Turns out it's the satyr's place, and he's a level 20 cleric while I'm a level 10 ranger, and he's not happy about what I did to his place. But it all started with the most unlikely natural 20 in history. I just remember the look on Braden's face. It's just going to stick with me. Just the whole, clearly, this was not supposed to happen, period. And found out later it was all improv. Braden was so convinced it wasn't supposed to happen, you had not even planned out the inside, if I recall correctly.
Not even a little bit. I basically... deer in the headlights moment for me is the DM, where it's just like, oh, so we're doing this live now. Okay. So, the 5 of them are basically trying to seek out this satyr cleric's help. They break down the door. And I'm just sitting here going, that wasn't supposed to happen. I have to rearrange how this was going to go.
Yeah,
oh, no.
I thought it was amazement with everything else. It turns out there was 5 seconds of, oh crap, I have to improv right now.
So we basically improv'd. You've got and this was a party of 5. They had a cleric and a paladin as well, who had basically washed their hands of this the moment they decided they were going to try and break down the door.
Yeah,
so
those lawful good people listening to the police.
They're walking over to the police department to kind of turn themselves in and explain the situation. And as they're going along, I mean, they'd broken down a really heavy-duty door, so they were locked back up behind them, and they saw police heading back with battering rams.
And we used actual stone shape to get like a stone wall behind us. So they were coming in with battering rams, and then they were seeing police run by with wheelbarrows of sledgehammers and then wheelbarrows of dynamite. And decided they did the right thing by washing their hands of it. And then when we finally found someone to help, who was kind of the nemesis of my PC at that point, she teleported us into the middle of the police station. And that's where that story ends for now, but the whole sequence of, Shane, you can't roll a 10, and this is the moment you roll an nat 20, it was just perfect. Just the whole domino effect. And having DM'd since then, the panicked, oh crap, I have 5 seconds to start improvising and act like I knew this all along. Been there, done that.
I think that's my single proudest improv moment.
It was delightful.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a heck of a story for sure. Yeah.
Anyway, go for number 3, my friend.
So, we've had an interesting moment where I've built a character that's annoyed the DM. I've had another interesting moment where I've annoyed the DM by taking a situation that was supposed to be completely stacked against us and turning it into something that was ludicrously profitable. So for my third story, we're going to shift gears to a time where I might have thrown one of my fellow party members just completely under the bus.
Oh, yeah.
And this was for the campaign that Shane's been DMing for us that we're a couple sessions away from wrapping.
Yeah, and 4 years.
Yeah, heck of a campaign. So, to kind of set the stage, I'm playing a paladin. And I'm okay with spoiling it at this point. This paladin was definitely lawful evil.
Yeah.
100%. I know this is probably not a big shock for those who have actually taken the time to sit down and think about it, but nobody really cottoned on to the fact that I was lawful evil.
He was a plant.
So, my code of honor was basically that I'm okay with working with the party. They're just a tool that I'm using to get to where I need to be. And that's kind of how I was able to work with them cohesively, despite the party being a bunch of predominantly good or neutral characters. And so we end up in this fantastic city. Was this Islandport?
Yep, this is Islandport.
So we end up in Islandport, and they're having a festival. And, of course, a lot of my inspiration for this Lawful Evil Paladin was kind of based on, for those who've read Order of the Stick, this was largely based on Tarquin, who is very clearly evil, but is totally willing and able to work with characters with different moral perspectives, so long as it furthers his own gains. So this character was built in a way to basically stretch the rules and take advantage of them as much as possible without breaking them. To the point where you can summon a mount, so I asked Shane if I could have an elephant. And he was like, sure.
Who at the time the story happens was busy getting drunk with some people on the outside of the city.
So I didn't have access to my actual paladin mount. I was riding a horse, and Shane has me roll a die to see, because I was in a hurry. I needed to get from point A to point B to deal with something. And naturally, I choose this time to roll like absolute garbage.
A 2.
So,
of course seems smart enough, I said.
Just like, I have no reason in game to question that, even though I know that's as straight a line for, oh no, I done messed up. So we go along, and this horse is similarly intoxicated. And of course, I'm using speak with animals to communicate with the horse when I realize things aren't quite right. And I'm assured, through much slurring, that this is fine.
As the drunken horse sprints through crowded streets. You can see where this is going.
This was about as ideal a situation as you could get for getting from point A to point B, until we reach a rather fancy mansion with a nice gate, and the horse at this point chooses this time to stumble to the point where a fully plated paladin slams through the gate. That poor gate. And
never had a chance.
Basically ends up smack in the middle of their courtyard. This is received poorly.
The guards were miffed, as you could understand.
So I am dragged in front of the master of the castle to explain my actions, as who's going to believe that I got on a talking drunken horse and that this was a total accident that I totally didn't mean to have happen, because the horse just kind of passed out at the gate, and it wasn't in the gate, it just graciously bucked me into the courtyard. So I have no idea who or what I'm dealing with at this point, but I do know that I absolutely don't want to do jail time, because that will interfere with what I'm trying to get done. I don't want to do community service, because no, I'm better than that. And so...
And your roles, you sensed just enough to know something was off, and you didn't want to
owe them a
up
favor.
To this. Yeah.
This is not something I want any part of. If I can wash my hands of it, best believe I'm scrubbing. So, eventually, I basically am as vague with the details as I can, very apologetic and gracious, and they basically agree that they'll let me go so long as I owe them a favor. I'm going to work this off for them the next morning at 8 a.m. And like, well, this is the middle of a festival and I have things to do. This isn't going to work with my schedule. So I basically am asked to give my name and where I'll be staying so that they can track me down. Now, one of these isn't a problem necessarily, but the other one, specifically my name, is definitely going to tie me to what's going on. All I've really got going for me here is that it's relatively dark since this happened at night, and for whatever reason this castle isn't especially brightly lit, which was also a tip-off that maybe this isn't the best place. So, our fighter, Constantine, who basically modeled his character after a soldier of the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah, kind of a Roman centurion.
He also wears heavy armor, much like I do. And it's dark enough. We're both humans. I bet you I can foist this on him, and he already has a proclivity for getting drunk and spending nights on the town. If I move quickly enough, I think I can actually just foist the consequences over here, and then I'll get brownie points for playing the sympathetic party member and helping to bail him out later. It's a win-win. So I'm asked to basically bluff because I'm lying through my teeth at this point.
But I gave him the chance to do it because when he gave the name Constantine, the other player's character, Constantine always did this Roman salute with the fist by the chest and then an open arm out. He did the exact perfect mimic of that salute as he said it.
I was channeling my inner Kenku.
And so like, all right, I'm going to give him a roll. And it was a high one. He went from rolling crap all session to rolling a 19. Plus, you were an evil paladin. You had a pretty good deception, if I remember right.
Yes.
So you got like 25, 26. Like, okay. Made him roll another one because to see the lie through. Rolled a nat 20. He's like, yeah.
And I was going to get one more, but I finished it with Ad Victorium. And
yeah. Like,
yeah. Shane is trying not to laugh at this point, and he just kind of looks over at Chris with a mix of laughing but also sympathy because...
Chris was a perfect sport about it. He's like, no, he gave the salute and hit Latin. He passed it all. And I gave Chris, as Constantine, one chance to see through his deception. He rolled like a nat 20 again, and Constantine rolled a natural 1. So it's like, there's nothing behind the paladin wanting to get you drunk for no apparent reason.
Yeah, I immediately am dismissed, make a beeline for the fighter, and it's like, hey, let's go drinking. It's a festival. And nothing wrong with that, and we get him back over to where we're staying after he's good and inebriated, and suddenly he's gone for whatever reason, and he left a note telling us not to worry about him, which of course the party worried about him. So me, being the good team player I was, went over to the estate where I suspected he was going to be and helped him with a delicate and extremely dangerous mission to retrieve something, which, as it happened, ended up being tied to a bunch of inner city politics that we ended up just completely in the midst of as a result of what happened.
I was hoping to set them up with one tripwire, and they just ran through a dozen right into the minefield. It was amazing as a DM.
But shortly after that experience, the master of the castle, who was actually a revenant, which we didn't realize at the time, whoops, died. Shortly after that misadventure, the paladin died, so there was literally nobody and no evidence to tie back this crime I did.
Yeah.
So I got off scot-free.
Yeah, there's no way in game to ever track it down with the way the paladin died. It's like there's nothing left to resurrect. We have an explosion big enough to destroy a wizard's tower. It's done, guys. It's that was amazing. It was the perfect sequence of bad rolls followed by near perfect rolls and role-playing. I give points for role-playing, and they nailed it. That was an amazing sequence. And, yeah. Constantine had no memory of doing this, but he was drinking a lot last night. Yup. That was one of the highlights of a very, very good campaign.
For sure. Sorry again, Chris.
Yep. Alright, well, I can't have a D&D story without bringing Adonis into the picture.
Oh, jeez. Here we go.
So, Adonis Averici, my character of how I fell in love with playing the Bard in 5e. I can't even begin to tell the number of stories that was about 2 years now. 2 years later, everybody in that campaign still brings him up on pretty much a monthly basis, so sometimes magic happens with the characters you weren't planning it with. I just thought it would be a throwaway character, and it turned out to be, boy, distilled chaos? I don't know how else to call it. Undistilled chaos?
Yeah, there was nothing distilled about that.
Yeah. We're running a Nathan campaign, and Nathan is known for taking the general rules of something and then customizing all of it beyond recognition in an awesome way. So you just never know what you're getting.
Yeah, Nathan campaign's great. You give him a box, and he'll be somewhere 6 miles away.
Yeah, he'll start 6 miles out of a box and go from there. And that's when he's not being creative. Mm-hmm. So he gave us, there were some custom enemies for this 3-person party we had at the time. They were like centaurs, except made of nothing but eyeballs, and then tongues that came out of the eyeballs to cut off and then animate a character's limbs. So not nice things. They were horror shows that probably belonged in the Lovecraft campaign.
Antelopes. Because they were made of hands.
That's right, hands. Not only was their hands. And then they would cut off a person's arm, which would then animate and join the larger antelope. And so, because of some situation where we didn't plan well, or we weren't paying attention, or possibly all of the above, because that we knew how to bicker with that party and it was entertaining. Somehow the bard was stuck between 2 of these things, with the rogue nowhere close and our armor front liner 90 feet away. So I'm starting the campaign with the dot is here like, oh, there were these 2 antelopes looking at me. I don't like it. But the plus side, I'm a bard. And chances are these things are not very charismatic. Which fortunately for me was true. So David was true to the point with making them. But my only chance, I thought, was, well, I have to find a way to use my bonus action, my action, and I cannot, for the love of God, get hit, because we're only level 4 or 5 at that point. Mm-hmm. Those things should have ended me. If one had got no hold of me, it would not have been good. And so while his character he's over here already, and he has to disengage, and he has to hide, and he has to get his not great archery score with advantage, and our frontline fighter is over there somewhere. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to keep Vicious Mockery and Baning over and over and over again. And fortunately for me, these non-charismatic things fail their charisma checks. So, painting the scene, I am trying desperately to stay alive as the bard by constantly insulting these 2 things that are attacking, because why do Vicious Mockery if you're not going to throw an actual insult out? And because they have no charisma, and because of Bane, they have to roll a d4, which he kept rolling 4s to take off of their save. They'd lose to Vicious Mockery, which meant they were at disadvantage next turn. So these things were at disadvantage and minus a d4. So they're both coming onto this fight scene, and Ben's appropriate response was, what the fuck? Because he's like, so I'm watching a bard insult these 2 horrific creatures over and over again while dancing around their feeble attempts to attack them. And then Nathan, like, yeah, that's quite a picture, isn't it?
Well, we're watching and seeing just how terrible these things are. Like, they have long tongues that they can use to basically grab you and reel you in. So we see one miss the bard and grab a stone and just shear it in half, trying to pull it over. And it's like... Yeah. Which is not encouraging for the rogue or the fighter, who really just don't want to be anywhere near this at this point.
My character heard a woman screaming, bard, so rushed forward and then saw them detach her arm into a living thing. So it was like, that's, yeah. So we have these horror creatures out of a Call of Cthulhu campaign, right, in Nathan's version of 5e. And the bard has to dance around insulting them, praying he keeps dodging their attempts to hit him until someone shows up. But it worked. It worked for 3 or 4 rounds, and it gets a hold of you. Wait, you forgot to roll your d4. He's like, come on, nothing but a 4. And then he swore loudly, I knew I got out of it again. But it's like, yeah, remember that time, Nathan, your custom enemies, where I insulted them to death before dancing away? And at that point, I was in love with the bard as a class, because battlefield management, it will save your life.
It absolutely will.
And so just the antelopes, Bane and Vicious Mockery, and somehow live to fight another day.
For sure. But now we want to hear some of your stories. Have you had any epic moments as either a player or a DM where you've gotten to completely turn the tables on a situation? Have you managed to bust chuck multiple party members for deeds that you did? Tell us all about it.
Did you accidentally almost manage to TPK your entire party like I did in his last campaign? So close.
So
wasn't trying, just so close. Yeah, we love these stories. What are your favorite ones? Is it one that the whole table appreciated, or did you have to find a new group? Let us know in the comments. Please subscribe and like. And as always, keep on gaming, and we'll see you next time. If you like what you just saw, please support us by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more great gaming content.